Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this episode, the Norfolk malting barley that makes our pints of British beer, and Northern Ireland needs a new independent regulator to ensure clean water, clean air, and better protection for nature.
Northern Ireland is a tiny place, and yet no one really knows who's in charge of what when it comes to the environment. So that's something we really want the civil service to improve on.
We'll have more on that in a few minutes' time. First of all, though, food and how we ensure a reliable supply for future generations in the face of climate change and global instability. Annual food price inflation, you'll have seen from yesterday's figures, dropped slightly last month, but it's still running up 4.5%, with extreme weather blamed for some of the price rises, which for some will ring alarm bells about our future food security. Well, the UK needs to see a radical and rapid transformation of its food system. That's according to a 3-year-long study led by the Agri-Food for Net Zero network. Professor Neil Ward from the University of East Anglia is one of the network's leaders.
Well, from the work that we've done, it feels clear that change is going to happen anyway, particularly because of climate change. It's already impacting on food production in the UK and overseas and affecting our supply chains. So climate change is going to drive change. And secondly, the international geopolitical scene has become much less stable, and that's likely to continue. So we're facing quite profound change over the next 2 decades. And the issue is whether we just let that buffet us or whether we try to manage and navigate that change in a way that maximizes public benefit.
OK, tell me about the kind of transformation that you are talking about.
I think there are 3 core elements to it, really. One is about the resilience of the agricultural sector, what is grown and how it's grown and where it's grown in the UK, and whether we can make our system more resilient and improve our domestic food security. Secondly, is about how we use the land. We're facing quite a squeeze on our land use. So we're going to need ways of producing food, but on less land. And thirdly is around what we eat. And we've got a problem with, at the population level, the UK diet is not healthy enough, and that is driving quite a lot of economic squeeze.
And you do look specifically at farming, and your vision, it sees UK farms as financially viable businesses working within carbon budgets for farms. Who will set and regulate carbon budgets?
We've got a national approach to carbon budgeting, which has been in place since the Climate Change Act of 2008. So there is a pathway and a plan around carbon budgeting. But I think the changes that we're going to have to go through around food production and with agriculture are probably akin to the scale of change that we experienced in the 1940s, 1950s, when our system of food production and our agriculture changed quite a lot. And we need to really think about the next 2.5 decades in those sorts of terms. It's that kind of scale of change that's going to be required.
You know, we've heard other calls from people like, say, Henry Dimbleby, who wrote the last government's food strategy, for these kinds of big structural changes to the UK's food system. Is there an appetite for them in government and in the food industry?
Well, if we don't embrace this opportunity to make radical change, then change is going to be forced upon us by circumstances, by climate change and by unstable international geopolitics. And it's likely to be the poor in society who suffer worse.
What needs to change to make that happen, to allow that transition?
If you look at the change on aggregate, it can look overwhelming, but what we've done in our report is break it down into different phases, the remainder of the 2020s, and then the 2030s, and then the 2040s. And we need to build a consensus around a clear vision. That was one of the things that did happen in the 1940s, was that government worked closely with farmers and with the agri-tech industry, and there was a sort of unity of purpose and a common goal. And it was quite a long-term goal as well.
That's Professor Neil Ward. Well, this year's heat and drought have proved challenging for malt barley producers. We're talking about beer and cider all this week on Farming Today. And of course, one crucial part of beer is malting barley. Crisp Malt, which is based at Great Ryborough in the heart of Norfolk, is celebrating its 155th year of taking in barley from local farmers. Anna Hill went along to meet Chris Borrett from Adams and Howling Agricultural Merchants, who work with the farmers growing the barley, and Rebecca G, Director of Procurement and Logistics at Crisps.
We're in the middle of Norfolk near Fakenham, and this site here has been here for many, many years.
Yes, since 1870. There's really only two main ingredients, barley and water. So there's three main processes: steeping, where we soak the grain in water to get the moisture nice and high. We then have the germination process, where we just let the grain grow as it normally would in the field. And then the final process is kilning, so we're then drying that grain right down to about 5% moisture. In that process we can add some flavour and colour.
Well, we've got a lorry tipped up here with the barley coming off the back of it. What is this, Chris?
Well, it looks like winter barley to me. It's nice and bright. So it was first combined before we had a bit of rain during the middle of the summer. I guess it's probably flagon. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's flagon.
You can tell just by looking at it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You nerd.
Experience.
Sorry.
Or age, I don't know which one of the two. But. So the farmers will have to produce a certain specification of malting barley for it to be accepted. So that's the size of grain, the amount of nitrogen in the grain, and also germination, so it's got to grow, and that's one of the most important things. And Norfolk is one of the best places to grow malting barley. It's a maritime climate, so it's slightly cooler than, say, in the middle of the country, and it produces a longer growing season. It's also down to soil type and grower knowledge as well.
We're now walking up steps. We can smell the barley now. We've come to the edge inside one of these silos, and we can see barley in a great big barrel, really. There are some arms which looks like they would swing round. Is that right?
Yes, so this is the steeping vessel. So this grain has just finished its steeping process, so it will now be sitting at about 45% moisture. So it's sitting now currently on a perforated floor, so it's got a huge amount of air going up through the grain. The bed will be about 2 metres deep, and we're allowing that protein matrix within the grain to break down. It does take a lot of skill. We have a lot of experienced operators here.
We see he's staring. That chap was staring through the grill and looking at the grain really carefully, wasn't he?
Yeah, so they're looking to make sure that it's at the right stage in the process.
We're just coming through a very damp corridor, dripping wet, and next door is the drying process. We're just coming into the control room. We've got screens in front of us, a lot of automation going on. Chris, all commodity markets are down at the moment. How has that affected malting?
We feel that the farmers' confidence is quite low at the moment, and we really want to be able to put something forward to give a 3 to 5 year focus on how they run their business. What we want to see is an increase in demand for local produce. We've got to work on these links through the chain to produce a more profitable crop.
Has the hectarage of barley dropped then for malting?
Yeah, we're seeing a reduction, and that's all to do with the demand and supply, and they're seeing prices drop, so they have reduced some of their area. But also there's hope that the markets will recover.
Rebecca, what about the demand?
Beer has been quite flat for a few years, and we are definitely seeing some opportunity there, though, in the rise of kind of low alcohol beers and a resurgence of kind of lagers as well. So some hope, definitely, but it has been a difficult year.
Rebecca G, ending that report from Anna Hill. Northern Ireland needs a new independent environmental regulator, properly staffed and financially resourced to tackle the many challenges it will face. That's one of the recommendations of a comprehensive review of the country's environmental governance, which its authors describe as a call to action. The review was prompted by a number of environmental concerns, including extensive and repeated blooms of blue-green algae in Lough Neagh, which supplies 40% of drinking water. The report also said there was starkly lacking clarity over roles, responsibilities and accountability. Dr Viviane Gravey from Queen's University in Belfast chaired the panel who carried out the review.
So Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK that doesn't currently have an independent environmental agency. But it's not just about the agency, it's about how the broader environmental governance system works.
Yeah, and the current regulator is the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, which is actually part of DERA, isn't it?
It is. It's an executive agency for DERA, so it's not exactly in the department, but it's also not exactly not. So it has this kind of weird operational independence, but not actually legal independence.
That was one of the shortfalls that you found in environmental governance. Where were the other shortfalls? What else did you find?
Your listeners may not be surprised, but there's not enough money. Even in NIEA, we're talking about a 25% vacancy rate. So there's a lot of people just missing in those key roles. We're seeing as well a lot of issues around, a bit like in England, Environmental Agency, NIEA or Natural England, they don't have their own website. All of their comms go through their parent department. And so that can then lead to lack of clarity, but also if sometimes a minister does something that is not necessarily good for the environment, then those agencies can't really say anything about it. And so I think just having that lack of clarity around who's in charge, who you can complain to about things was one of the big issues. It's like Northern Ireland is a tiny place, and yet no one really knows who's in charge of what when it comes to the environment. So that's something we really want the civil service to improve on.
We've covered the dire state of water in Lough Neagh over the past couple of years. Do you think your recommendations would make a difference to the situation there?
Yes, and in two different ways. So the first one is we're talking about more environmental information, as there's a lot of freedom of information requests going right now into government here about, what's the status of the water, all of this. So trying to make it much more easily accessible for stakeholders and for the general public just to know what the state of the environment is. So that something else like Lough Neagh is picked up upon much earlier. We're also talking about more powers to enforce, so more civil sanctions, more fixed penalties. The kind of thing that is quite common in England, Wales or Scotland is actually quite rare in Northern Ireland. The fines level are lower, but there are also fewer tools. Now, when it comes to the current situation in Lough Neagh, I think one thing that has been quite problematic in many ways is we've got agreement between NI Water, which is our one public provider of water in Northern Ireland, and the department. And that's just basically saying that even though, yes, we know you are polluting, but we will not be taking you to court because we know that we have historically underfunded you. The other polluters, they are being taken to court, but not the water agency. And if politicians keep on then, oh, but don't worry, we're not taking you to court. So perhaps do we really need to correct that historical underinvestment? So in many ways, having huge fines on water companies in England has really put debate around how much money needs to go into the water industry.
Andrew Muir, the Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Minister, has told the BBC that he has fully accepted your panel's recommendations. Do you think those recommendations will be as well received by the agricultural community?
We have engaged thoroughly through the report process with the farming community. And I think if they look into the details of the report, they'll see recommendations such as on how inspectors should talk to each other to learn best practice on how to deal with regulated industries. But at the same time, it is a time of incredible flux for the farming community in Northern Ireland. But really at the heart of this, we are trying to get more clarity and more coherence to everyone around, what are the environmental rules, how you should implement them. If there's an issue, this is how you contact people. We also want clear accountability in the Assembly. So I think there is a lot there that should actually appease some concerns from the farming community. This is definitely not a review against them. This is something to improve environmental governance for everyone in Northern Ireland.
And that's Dr Viviane Gravey from Queen's University. And that's it from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Rebecca Rooney. And Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.